Hi BookTube, I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Read Stuff. I'm here in the book shack and it's Tuesday. I'm going to do Tag Tuesday. And the tag I'm going to do has been devised by one of my favourite booktubers, Greg, at Another Bibliophile Reads, and it's called the Bookish A to Z Hot or Not tag. I was tagged by another of my favourite booktubers, Alex at Alex Unabridged, and all I need to do is go through the 26 A to Z prompts and tell you whether I think they're hot or not. So, let's start. A is for audiobooks, and audiobooks starts with a not from me, I'm afraid. I've only ever read, I need to be actively engaged with what I'm reading. And if I've just got headphones in and I'm not doing anything, then or I just fall asleep. So the only time I actually ever listened to an audiobook is when I was commuting regularly from Nottingham to Guildford, which ought to be a journey of about 2.5, 3 hours and regularly took 3.5, 4 hours. So I had an audiobook then, but that was a fair few years ago now, so that's a not. B is for Bildungsroman, dealing with a person's formative years or spiritual education. I'm not overly bothered about people's spiritual education, but I do like a nice coming of age novel. And I am thinking Françoise Sagan and, well, Bonjour Tristesse specifically, but anything that she's written, basically. Um, and The Outsiders by Essie Hinton. Loved those. So I'm going to say hot for that one. C is for children's books. Definitely hot. I started reading very young and I, it was my escapism. I thought children's books were fabulous. And I genuinely believe that all adults ought to retain a little spark of that childlike wonder. It's healthy. And so I still enjoy children's books and I read them regularly. Um, D is for digital. Hot. If you'd have asked me last year, I would have said not. But I have been, I've read quite a few books in digital format and I have built up quite a big library in digital format. They have several advantages. If I'm out somewhere and stuck or whatever, I'm waiting, then I've always got a book on my phone. They take up less space, and space is at a premium here. And I don't know, I just find the format really good. There's a lot available, a huge amount available, and also you can get a lot of things quite cheap if you shop around. So definitely hot. Um, E is for experimental. I suppose by experimental, we're looking at different formats, different ways of doing things. So I'm thinking maybe The Appeal by Janice Hallett, or what else did she do? A Twyford Code. Um, Grief is a Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. Um, so on the experimental stuff that I have read, I'm going to say hot. F is for fantasy. And when I had gone through all my children's books when I was younger, it was The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that introduced me to more substantial books, and I loved them. So, although I don't read a lot of fantasy now, I'm still going to say that's hot. G is for graphic novel, and again, that is something that I am new to. My stepson is a big fan, and earlier this year he lent me a couple of books. One I thoroughly enjoyed, one was a bit twee for me, but as a format, I think they're fabulous. Um, H is for horror, and again, I was quite young when I delved into things like, well, James Herbert, I think, was my first foray into horror. I still love a good horror story. Um, Definitely hot. I is for inspirational. Now, as a genre, it's not something that I would tend to read, but I find people and things that I read about inspirational. So I think I'm going to say not here, as I'm going to be thinking about a genre rather than individual books that I find inspirational. So generally, the genre of inspirational reading, no, not for me. J is for journalism. Absolutely hot. Journalist for nearly 40 years. I couldn't say otherwise, really, could I? I like a decent bit of journalism. And I mean, think Watergate, think the Catholic priest scandal in Boston. Um, a reportage is, I've got great books of reportage and I really enjoy them. Journalism done properly is brilliant. So I am definitely going to say hot. Journalism done badly is really, really awful. But I'm going to go for the good stuff. K is for kitsch. Again, I think of kitsch as twee, and it's probably not for me. So I'm going to say not for that one. Um, L is for library, and those are definitely, definitely hot. I think everybody ought to have access to a decent library. In fact, we in Nottingham have a new library that just opened on Monday, the Central City Library, and I am looking forward very much to going and exploring there next week. But libraries as a basic concept can't be anything other than hot, can they? M is for mystery. I like mysteries. I like political mysteries. I like thrillers. I like police procedurals. I like crime novels of all sorts. So definitely hot for me. And it's the nonfiction, and I read a lot of nonfiction. So this again, definitely hot. I think predominantly my nonfiction reading is history, but it's followed quite closely by travel writing, which I love. I also like things like economics and geography and sociology. Not so good on the science stuff. I don't think of myself as a particularly scientific person. Maybe I ought to attempt a few more in that genre. Um, I have Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time sitting on the shelf, and I keep meaning to read it, but I'm sort of put off by the fact that he was so clever. Um, and I'm not sure. I don't know whether it will go straight over my head, but one day I'll give it a go. But generally, non-fiction, hot. Omnibus. I like a nice omnibus in a digital format. So, for example, I have the complete works of Shakespeare on my Kindle. The complete works of Shakespeare in hard copy would be cumbersome and difficult to read. It isn't in digital format. Also, once I have read a physical book, I like it to be removed from the to be read shelves and put on the I have read this shelves in the house. And I might not want to read all the whole omnibus all in one go, but it would upset me if a book that I had read was still on my TBR shelf because it was joined up with a couple of others. So, physical copies of omnibuses, no. Digital copies, yes, please. Um, P is for poetry. I'm going to say hot. I like poetry. I don't understand everything that I read. There are some that I like very much. Uh, Sometimes silly things upset me about them, like when I was reading the Edgar Allan Poe poems, and he has just thrown exclamation marks everywhere. Um, it's very, very wide genre. It's like saying, do you like novels? Um, so yes, there are some I like, some I don't understand, some I don't like, but generally I'd say hot. Quests. Back to the Lord of the Rings here. When you're talking quests like that, physical quests, I think they're hot. Spiritual quests, not so much. Romance, it's not from me. There has to be more involved in a book than romance. Um, I don't like. I don't really like rom coms. I don't like things like category romance. You know, your Mills and Boone stuff. The only time I'll read those is Garb August. There's just there's just too much other stuff that I am interested in to bother about something that I'm really not. So that's a not for me. Science fiction, however, for S is definitely hot. I was reared on science fiction. My father, who was an avid reader, also happened to be a rocket scientist and was pretty hot on his science fiction. So um, it wasn't really a case of me having to have to follow in his footsteps, but I just loved it and still read quite a lot now. T is for translation, definitely hot. Why would I restrict myself to something that's only written in English when there's so much more out there? One of my favourite authors is Ishmael Kadari, who is Albanian. I read a lot of Japanese literature. I read a lot of French literature. I read a lot of Scandi noir. All of those are translated. Yes, definitely hot. Needs a good translator though. Ubermensch, Superman or the Extraordinary Human. Characters who can do everything. Generally, I'd say not. There is one exception, and that's Pippi Longstocking, who is brilliant. And she can do everything, even though she's only a child. Victorian literature is V, and yes, I very much like Victorian literature. Have done for decades. Really enjoyed Victober this year. Oddly, I'd never read any Anthony Trollope before this year, and just thought it was fabulous. But when we're talking, I fell I fell out of love with Dickens when I was at school, and didn't read very much of it until earlier this year when I read A Tale of Two Cities and then Hard Times, and loved them both. But Bronte's, Gaskell, um, who else did I read a lot? I read some Oscar Wilde this year, Georgian Whedon, guessing. Anyway, I like Victorian literature. It's hot. W is for Western. If you'd have asked me this at the same time last year, I would have said not. But Garb August has happened since then, and I ordered lots of Western books trying to find a cigarette ad in one of them. I didn't find the cigarette ad in one of them, but I did find that I quite like the Westerns. So I'm going to say hot. I don't think the ones I've read are ever going to win any awards for literature. However, they were fun. They were fun and I enjoyed them. And that's the aim, isn't it? So hot for that. X is for X-rated. There was a time when I was much, much younger and didn't know very much that I thought X-rated books were good. Now, no. I read a couple for Garb August, and honestly, I felt like a voyeur. I might just as well have gone dogging. It reinforced in me the idea that sex isn't a spectator sport, at least not for me. Young adult. I'm an adult. I'm obviously not young. When I was a young adult, there weren't really any young adult books. You read children's books and then you read adult books. So I don't think I've read enough of them to actively have an opinion. So I'm going to say lukewarm, and what I might do is go and see if I can find some and see what I think of them. But at the moment, don't really know very much about them. Zeitgeist, spirit or mood of the times. I've just finished reading A Testament of Youth, and Vera Brittain is summing up the spirit of the times at that time, post First World War, pre Second World War, and that I thought was brilliant. I think reading the spirit of the times as history is hot. I'm not sure I'd read a book about how someone coped during COVID. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that one, because a lot of it I think is hot and some of it I think isn't. So that was my Bookish A to Z hot or not tag. Thank you to Alex for tagging me. Thank you for Greg for creating it. I don't know who to tag because I've seen a lot of the people I follow have already done this tag. So all I'm going to say is if you want to do this tag, do it and let me know, because I'd be very interested in hearing what you had to say. Thank you for popping by. Please like and subscribe. I will be back midweek when I'm going to do a December TBR. So, nice to see you, and I hope I will see you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.